Rolling around at the speed of sound, Sonic the Hedgehog blasted onto the Genesis and Mega Drive in 1991, bringing to bear his style and speed against Nintendo in the console wars. A few months later, the incredible Super Mario World was released on the brand new Super Nintendo/Famicom, but Sega was far from defeated. They still had some momentum left, and their new mascot was far from down for the count. His most defining feature, his speed, was his selling point. So in order to follow up on the success of his inaugural outing, he needed to go even faster. There was really only one problem. Sonic 1 had been an unprecedented success, skyrocketing Sega to 65% of the market share in North America. But Yuji Naka, Sonic's co-creator, who had worked for Sega for over a decade and was foundational in the company's success, was unhappy. He asked for increased compensation, which Sega would not give him, and more recognition for the developers, which Sega also denied. He should have been a hero, but he felt he received almost no credit for Sonic, and by extension, Sega's success. Sega at the time did not credit developers. After toiling for decades creating Sega titles, Naka had had enough. This did not leave Sega with no options going forward, though. Naka was the technical wizard who made Sonic's speed and mechanics possible, but when Naka built the demo for the game, it was just nothing but a ball and a little man running around on hills. Naka wanted the character to be a hedgehog, but it was Naoto Noshima who took the ball and made him into an agent of attitude. Oshima had also proposed a similar concept to Naka's prior, but was unable to implement it. In essence, the two men created Sonic together and founded Sonic Team internally at Sega to bring the game to fruition. With Naka now gone, Sega still had one of Sonic's key creators and the Sonic Team. That might have been it for Naka, but Sonic was not done with his co-creator quite yet. It would take another famous developer to bring Naka back into Sega, and he would hail from a strange land, home of Sonic's true success. Mark Cerny rose from Atari's ashes, a full-blown video game developer with impressive credentials. After Atari crashed the industry in North America, Cerny knew it was going to be tough being a game developer in a country that, for the moment, did not want to play video games. He landed at Sega and moved to Japan, working on the Master System and Genesis games for the company. But with gaming's renewed interest in North America, and Sega's success with Sonic, Cerny suggested Sega open a development branch in North America. Cerny hired Naka, and Sega hired his new development branch, STI, to develop Sonic 2. Yep, Sonic 2 was developed in California by a combined team of Japanese and American developers. Oshima would lead the development of Sonic CD and Knuckles Chaotix, but both Sonic sequels would be led by Naka in California. That said, the development of the sequel was not a bed of roses. From the start, Sega was reluctant to greenlight the project, with Sega of America being trepidatious to say the least. But suddenly, they changed direction, asking for the game by the holidays. This gave the new team 9 months to develop the game, which was an even shorter period of time than the original. In a world where sequels were not guaranteed success, this was quite a tall challenge, and would have probably been impossible except for the preliminary work already done for the pitch. There was also the obvious language barrier to overcome. But in addition to these problems, Naka just did not care for the American members of the team. Craig Stitt, one of the designers, called Naka an arrogant pain in the ass, so it seems the feeling was mutual. Tensions continued to rise, and Cerny ended up leaving partway through development because he felt the American programmers were just not being treated well. All of these factors, in addition to the time constraints, led to several cuts being made to the game. When it came to developing further sequels in America, STI was divided into American and Japanese teams moving forward, with the American teams developing games like Sonic Spinball, and Naka leading a team to develop Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Eventually, Naka returned to Japan and STI closed in 1996. Cerny would go on to have an impressive career moving to hardware design and working with Sony to design many of their modern consoles. Despite the working environment being tepid at best and the heat from the release of Super Mario World, Sonic 2 carries the banner of Sega's conquest pretty well. The game is not as impressive a package on the whole as Super Mario World, but it does feel incredibly fast, and some new features further distinguish its identity as more than just a Mario killer. On the speed front, the most obvious improvement is the spin dash. This single implementation is so essential to Sonic's identity that most people forget that Sonic 1 lacked it, and subsequent remakes added the mechanic retroactively. Even today, hitting the button 6 times to get max speed is one of the most satisfying gaming mechanics ever conceived. Unleashing the spin dash propels Sonic forward like a car from a burnout on a racetrack. This incrementally controlled instant acceleration equips high-level players with the ability to recover speed quickly. In the hands of a skilled player, levels can be completed in a matter of seconds. Mario levels were getting longer, Sonic levels were getting shorter. Returning mechanics include the ring system, which provides grace to match Sonic's speed, so the game could be more than a running simulator. Obstacles are placed in Sonic's path, and if the player's reaction times or memory come up short with rings, they can continue as long as they at least have one. But you want more than one. Getting 50 rings and reaching a checkpoint unlocks a bonus level where Sonic can earn a Chaos Emerald. Collecting all the emeralds unlocks another new feature, but I think I will return to it in a second. Reaching the end of the level with 50 rings nets you a continue, and collecting 100 gives you an extra life. Checkpoints carry over from the original game, but feel more frequent, especially given they can be used to access the bonus stages. You can collect every single Chaos Emerald before getting even out of the first area. The bonus levels are much improved and show off some impressive 3D graphical effects. These are pre-rendered graphics, so that's, even before Donkey Kong Country. Collecting the allotted amount of rings in these levels inside the given time limit yields, as mentioned, a Chaos Emerald. There are 7 in total, and collecting all of them unlocks Super Mickey. Super Saiyan. In super form, Sonic is essentially invincible and glides through stages lasting as long as Sonic has rings to fuel it. It can only be activated when Sonic has 50 rings. Sonic has access to some power-ups via these little monitors that appear through the stage. Speed shoes make him unbelievably fast, and invincibility makes him, you get it. There's also the shield power-up, which provides Sonic with an extra hit, and that's about all it does, really. Not that you need more power-ups, but Sonic 3 would include more of these features and abilities to further increase the diversity with the ever-increasing character roster. Oh yeah, there is one more new feature that we should mention. Tails miles per hours. You get it? Miles per hours? It's hilarious. Anyway, Tails is the new sidekick and fellow adventurer. Other games would do more to flesh out his character, but in the context of Sonic 2, most of what we get in the game is that he is Sonic, but yellow, and he can fly. Also, he has a plane with Sonic's name on it, which is cool. Behind the scenes, Tails was envisioned as a character for younger players to interact with in co-op from the very start. And the relationship between Sonic and Tails was envisioned like Piccolo and Gohan's relationship from Dragon Ball Z.
Listen up, Runt! Today we're going to commence your intense training under me.
But wait, wouldn't that cause horrible muscle degeneration for somebody my age?
Nerd!
What?
Plugging in a second controller means that this additional character can be played in real time in one-player mode. This is the famous little brother mechanic. Tails struggles to stay on screen since even if he is player-controlled, the camera does not focus on him and things move pretty fast. During boss battles, he can deal damage, which, if you are playing with your little brother, is great, as Tails can die over and over again with no real consequences. But if you're playing alone, sometimes it's better to turn Tails off. There is a lot of novelty with the inclusion of Tails, but he sometimes gets in the way in single-player sessions. However, Sonic 2 also includes a split-screen 2-player campaign. This mode uses the Genesis interlaced graphics capabilities and essentially runs 2 copies of the game simultaneously. As you might imagine, that leads to performance issues, running only at 30 frames per second and containing far simpler geometry and fewer on-screen sprites. This mode just barely runs. But it's quite a technical achievement nonetheless. It does what Nintendo doesn't, for sure. I mean, barely, but it does. But the real star of the game is the levels. They were designed by, oh boy, I'm gonna struggle with this name, Hirokazu Yasuhara? I'm so sorry. In Japan on paper, and then sent to North America where artists built them and using notes from Japan, decorated them. Levels were designed with 3 dimensions as a focus, and like Sonic 1, have multiple paths to the end goal. More skilled players run at the top of the stages. It's more difficult to stay up there, but it is the fastest path to the goal. Make a mistake, and you usually wind up on a lower level, but all paths lead to the end. With a variety of environments and enemies, Sonic goes on a seeming world tour to different lands to chase Eggman back where he came from. Culminating with 2 boss fights on the moon, the levels are designed masterfully and are chock full of scrolling effects and immaculate details. Seriously, the scrolling in this game is amazing. Nakamura returned to provide the music, but not without further internal struggles. His success with the soundtrack for Sonic 1 made him a little famous and led to him asking for more money, which at first Sega did not want to pay. So they tried developing the music internally. Arranged music was sent to the STI team in California from Japan, and they let Sega of Japan know that it was awful. And Nakamura got the money he wanted, and we got another banger soundtrack. Sonic music is always good, with very few exceptions. With Nakamura's background in J-pop, the soundtrack was more modern in the 90s than Nintendo's reliance on more classical styles. I'm not saying I prefer one to the other. Nintendo music tends to be a little bit more timeless, while Sonic definitely feels born in the 80s. I especially like Chemical Plant Zone, but I cannot think of a single bad song on the soundtrack. At the end of development, the team ran out of file size. They had intended to release the game on a 4 meg cart, but got approval from Japan to double the file size. I do not usually mention bug testing in these videos, but it's important to note the contributions of Sega of America's testing team. The game's director, Masahara Yoshi, who took over when Cerny left, said that the game would not have been ready for release without the work of Sega of America's bug testers, who were more thorough in his opinion than their Japanese counterparts. Releasing in time for Thanksgiving in 1992, Sonic 2 exploded onto the scene to rave reviews and great sales. An even more monumental feat considering the difficulties to bring the game to life. For me, playing the game reminds me of sitting around the CRT with my brother and taking turns playing Sonic and Tails. I also remember clearly locking the cartridge onto the Knuckles cartridge and exploring the world as Knuckles. It's wild to think that 2 years later the add-on was backwards compatible with Sonic 2. Except that Eggman Robo-Boss, it's hard already, but Knuckles barely jumps high enough to clear the robot's arms, which makes the final boss even more challenging. Another classic that is easier to play than ever, with dozens of re-releases and remakes. If somehow you have missed it, give it a whirl. It's a bona fide classic and comes fully recommended. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day.